G'day everyone and welcome back to another video. The Leopard 1 is now 7.7 and a lot of people have been wondering whether it was a good change or a bad change. In my opinion, it was a fantastic change. A lot of people have also been asking if the Leopard was going to be as good as it was on release. If any of you remember, the Leopard 1 was an absolute monster when it was released, and it was just tearing up everything, especially in the hands of really good players, because they could use that good mobility and that really good gun to flank around and do some real damage, control power positions. That has slightly changed since the addition of stabilizers, and now the Leopard 1 is sort of limited to hard flanking, and that's not really possible on small maps, which doesn't give it a lot of options, especially for people who don't have a lineup at 8.0. But now that's completely changed, and it's a really good change. The Leopard 1 can now face the T29, T34-100, Carnarvon, Tortoise, FV 4005, Type 62, and I think that's pretty much it. Maybe in arcade it can face the King Tiger, but who plays arcade these days? What do I think about this? Obviously, I think it's fantastic. The Leopard is not going to be nearly as, quote, OP as it was when it was first introduced. It's not going to be the stamping monster, but it's definitely going to have a much better chance than it did previously. It's at the same battle rating now as the T54-47 and the other T54s, which is quite nice, seeing as though the T54-47 and the Leopard 1 are more or less on equal footing. The T54 has the armor, the Leopard has the mobility. Both of them can pen each other. I think they're a perfect match for each other. A bit like the M18 and the T34-85. I've always thought that there are some tanks that just are perfect to fight against each other, and the Leopard and the T54-47 are definitely one of them, and I'm really happy with the change that Gaijin has made towards making them opponents at the same battle rating. I honestly think 7.3 and 7.7 are going to be the new 6.7, especially now. I think it's going to be wonderful because I've really enjoyed 7.0, 7.3, 7.7 before the battle rating changes, and in fact before the patch. And I think now that the 7.7s are clear of the MBT and the T64 and the Chieftain 10, we've got a really nice battle rating range opening up, and we're going to get a lot more of those late tier 4, early tier 5 battles around 6.3, 6.7. Obviously there is still a little bit of work to be done. I think in that battle rating range, just a couple of small things. But for the Leopard itself, I think it's got a real nice fighting chance at being one of the stars of that battle rating range, especially now that it has a really good lineup. It's got Kugelblitz, Coelian, Mouse, E100 if you have it, Horton 229, Arado B, Arado C, and of course you've got the Jag Tiger, 105 King Tiger, and Panther 2 to back that up. And if you want to go into premiums, you'll have the RU251. And I think now that the Leopard is part of that 7.7 lineup, that's good for mouse players as well, because the mouse will finally have a decent teammate at that battle rating to go and do the flanking and to do the support. I have played a little bit of Leopard and mouse with Dudge, and it has gone relatively well, seeing as though one could take the hits, despite Dudge being stock. He could take the hits, and I could do the damage. And that's a really, really nice ability to have them both at the same battle rating. So you can have these teams of Mouses and E100s and Leopards, and then you can back them up with whatever SPAA and air support that you choose, which is fantastic. And now with the T-54s all at 7.7, the IS-6 at 7.3, there's a greater chance of them all being closer together, and you have this really, really nice battle of high pen, good big armor values, and just that really early tier 5 meta that I really, really missed with 6.7 and 7.3 battles. It's really nice to see this all back. Now, in the background, you can see a couple of the good games that I had. And I have had a lot of bad games. But this is simply because I think there are a couple of tanks on the Russian side that are being spammed out by a lot of people that aren't really confident in playing them. Such as the Object 120, find a lot of them camping the back of the map when it's basically a Leopard 1 that has a slightly more stable gun and a lot better pen, obviously, but that doesn't make really much of a difference at this battle rating. But you have just such a plethora of tanks there and stuff that the Leopard can really compete with, whereas if it were left at 8.0, it would have to face KPZs, MBTs, and they would just make mincemeat out of it. It would just crumble, and it would have... You'd see the stats on Thunderskill, they would be awful. They would be, at the moment, or at least at the time that Mike Goes Boom did his little close air support rant just before the patch hit, the Leopard had a 0.5 KD. I think that's going to change a little bit for the better since the Leopard was introduced to 7.7 and that low tier 5 meta. Granted, it doesn't have the HEATFS to use anymore because it's pretty much garbage, save for a few unique cases, but it still does have its HEATFS and its APDS shell, which are reasonably useful. And I think that those shells are enough for the Leopard to still compete against Carnarvon's T29s, and obviously the Carnarvon and T29 can both fight them back with relative ease. So it's really opened up this whole new, I suppose, era for the Leopard, where the Leopard still has to watch what it fights, but it has a chance because it doesn't have to fight as many stabilized tanks. It still has the Brits, and although that's a real hit for the Leopard can absolutely, with no issue at all, pen all of those tanks from almost all angles at almost all ranges. You think about, for example, the T-54-47 and the Leopard 1. They both are sort of polar opposites. The Carnarvon and the T-29 are that big heavy tank, the big strong armor. They can take a lot of punishment. They can deal that punishment really well. And the Leopard is the light, nimble tank that can deal the punishment, but it needs to be in the ambush position. It needs to fire off first. And because the Leopard is now at 7.7, it can utilize its lack of stabilizer a lot more effectively. Granted, the gun still bounces quite a lot, but you can sort of afford to push out sometimes, in some cases, and make that quick snapshot, because there isn't a moving chieftain heading straight towards you, or there isn't a moving KPZ, and you actually have that chance, which is really, really nice and really, really welcome. Well done, Gaijin.